So you remember Zion Williamson at Duke, right? I mean, the guy wasn't just a college player, he was a straight-up phenomenon. But what you might not know is that while we were all watching those insane dunks, a massive legal fight was brewing. And the whole thing, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, came down to one kind of weird question.
I know, it sounds crazy, doesn't it? Of course he was a student athlete. He was playing for Duke, for crying out loud. But as we're about to find out, in the world of high-stakes sports contracts, the simplest-sounding questions can have the most complicated and most expensive answers.
So let's really get into this. Because the way the court defined that one simple term, student athlete, was literally the difference between a multi-million-dollar contract and a completely worthless piece of paper.
All right, so how did we even get here? To really get the legal fight, we've got to rewind a bit, right back to the moment Zion's college career was ending and his pro career was about to kick off.
Okay, so here's how it all went down. After that legendary freshman season, Zion signs this huge 5-year marketing deal with an agency called Prime Sports. Everything's looking good, right? Nope. The ink's barely dry, and the whole thing just implodes. Get this, just a few weeks later, on the very same day he officially cuts ties with Prime, he signs with their big-time competitor, CAA. Oof, you can just imagine. Prime Sports was not happy. Not at all. They were ready for a fight.
Now, here's the thing. Williamson didn't just walk away from the contract. His legal team went for the jugular. They argued the contract was never even legal in the first place, all because of this really powerful but really specific state law in North Carolina. Williamson's lawyers pointed to something called the North Carolina Uniform Athlete Agents Act. Now, this is a law that was created specifically to protect college athletes from sketchy agents, and they argued that this act made the Prime Sports contract totally void from the get-go. And here's the key. This law has super strict rules. Williamson's team found two huge violations. First, Prime Sports never even registered as an agent in North Carolina, which you absolutely have to do. And second, the contract itself was missing a very specific bold-letter warning that the law requires. And this is the exact text. This warning, in all caps, by law, had to be in that contract, right above where Zion signed. It's this giant, impossible-to-miss warning shot about losing your eligibility. The fact that it wasn't there, well, that was a massive, massive problem for Prime Sports, because the law says that omission alone makes the contract voidable. So, case closed, right? You'd think so. But this is where things get really wild. Prime Sports fought back with a pretty shocking argument. They said that law, with all its protections, it didn't even apply to Zion Williamson.
So the whole case suddenly hinged on how you define student athlete, but not just in general, how you define it according to this North Carolina law. The law says it's someone who engages in, is eligible to engage in, or may be eligible to engage in a college sport. Okay, seems pretty clear. Zion was definitely engaging in basketball at Duke.
So this is where it gets really interesting. Prime Sports comes back with this creative argument. They say, hey, hold on. We think Zion took improper benefits, which is against NCAA rules. That means he was already ineligible before he ever signed with us. See their logic? They're claiming that if he was technically ineligible, then he wasn't a student athlete, which means the law that's supposed to protect student athletes doesn't apply to him. It's a pretty clever move. Of course, Zion's team just said, that's ridiculous. The guy was literally on the court playing for Duke. He was engaged in the sport. End of story. The law has to protect him. So you've got these two totally opposite takes. One side says, hey, he was playing. That's all that matters. The other side says, no, these unproven NCAA allegations are what really count. So, what did the court do? Well, the court's job wasn't to play NCAA detective. It had one role, statutory interpretation, which is just a fancy way of saying they had to figure out what the North Carolina government meant when they wrote the law. And the court's answer was refreshingly direct. It looked at the plain words of the law and basically said if you were engaged in a sport, like Zion obviously was, then for the purposes of this law, you're a student athlete. Period. Full stop. And to really hammer this point home, the court dug even deeper. It looked at the official notes for the model law that North Carolina's version is based on, just to see what the original thinking was behind the rule. And that commentary couldn't be clearer. It says that just because a player might have broken a rule, that doesn't automatically make them ineligible. That only happens after an official call has been made by the school or an organization like, the NCAA. And that right there was the nail in the coffin for Prime's argument.
The NCAA never said Zion was ineligible. Duke never said he was ineligible. So the court concluded that it couldn't just guess or hypothesize about what the NCAA might have done. Courts deal in what is, not what could have been.
And this last quote from the ruling really puts a bow on it. The NCAA is a private club, basically, and the court's message was loud and clear. It's not our job to enforce the NCAA's rulebook for them. That's their job. The court's job is to enforce the law of North Carolina.
So, with all that, the decision was simple. Zion Williamson was a student-athlete under the law. Prime Sports did not follow the law. Therefore, the contract was void. Williamson wins. Okay, so, you might be thinking, that's a cool story about one superstar. But why does this really matter? Well, this decision actually sent some pretty big shockwaves through the whole world of college sports, and it affects everyone, agents, athletes, and even the NCAA.
So let's break down the big takeaways here. First, if an athlete is on the field or on the court, they are protected by these laws. It's that simple. Second, being ineligible isn't just an accusation someone can throw around. It's an official ruling that has to come from the NCAA or the school. Third, the courts drew a clear line in the sand. They are not the NCAA police. And maybe most importantly, this is a huge warning to agents. Follow the rules, every single little one, or your multi-million-dollar deal might just disappear.
And this whole case leaves us with a really fascinating question, especially today. For decades, the NCAA had total control over what it meant to be an amateur. But now, with courts backing away from enforcing those rules, and with NIL deals changing everything, it really makes you wonder, in this brand new world of college sports, who actually gets to decide what a student-athlete even is anymore?